The Sentinel lived his new life much differently than his last. He secluded himself in his lab. Even the government couldn't contact him. Too many people wanted to know his story. How did he blow up Elysium? How did he single-handedly end the war? Those questions were exactly his problem. He didn't think there was any way it could end that easily. He didn't want to live just accepting what everyone else had thought. He wanted answers, closure, and revenge for Matrona and Kogar's deaths. He was well past uncovering his true purpose. He sat alone at a lab counter. The box sat in front of him, off and idle. He rested his head on his arms and stared at his box with weak, tired eyes. Despite the Sentinel's outward appearance looking young, no older than 20, his old age was clear in his eyes. He didn't know what to do anymore. The hours he didn't spend moping, he spent sleeping. Even with the lights in the lab house turned off and the blinds always closed, the sunlight still irritated him. He wore dark sunglasses at all times. One morning he woke on the kitchen counter. The patches that once allowed his box to float were missing, so he decided crafting new ones would be a good idea. He knew he couldn't just sit around and do nothing for the rest of his life, so he had to start somewhere. His new patches were yellow to complement the black. He added patches to black sweatpants he wore instead of his ruined jeans. He began to work on improving the box. He remade the outer shell, opting against lines attaching the quarter circles to the middle ones. He kept the same color scheme. He began work programming an AI for the box. Several months into his work, he suddenly stopped. He hadn't spoken to anyone in ages. He hadn't been taking care of himself. His stubble grew to an unkempt beard. Sleep was becoming a rarity, and even when he did get some, it wasn't because he wanted to. He stared at himself in his bathroom mirror. Why? Was the first word he had spoken in months. Why am I still working on this stupid lamp? The war's over. I don't need this, he told himself. It was true that the war had ended. The lingering Gars left on Earth were picked off after their planet had been destroyed. People seemed to recover fine without the Sentinel. But it isn't about that, is it? No. He spread his arms across the sink to hold up his body, and he let his head drop. I don't think it's over, that's what it is. Isn't it? He took off his glasses and put them on the counter. He squinted and shielded his eyes from the dim bathroom light. He splashed his face with water. No, that's not it either, he whispered, staring at himself again. It was never about the war. The time machine is to protect people in general. He stood up straighter. At least that's what the guy in the jacket told me. But why? Why me? He turned off the light and put his sunglasses back on. And if I try to find him again, I'll be taken away for who knows how many more years I won't remember. More time passed, and the Sentinel would keep talking to himself just to pass the time. Some of the adjustments he made to the box seemed completely unnecessary, even to him. He was doing it just to have something to do. He hadn't been outside in a while, and he refrained from using his powers. He told the box, which is what he talked to now to convince himself that he wasn't talking to himself, that he shouldn't use his powers. He told the box, and himself, that it was because of his powers that Matrona died. He remembered his exogauntlet. He remembered that it was used to restrict his powers, and that because of it, his powers wouldn't go out of control. He thought that maybe, because he didn't have it the night Matrona died, that it was the reason the plasma buried too deep. He needed a new gauntlet. He needed one that would suppress his powers entirely. This new gauntlet, which took him a while to construct, was bulkier. Yellow and gold, the gauntlet surrounded his entire fist and a good chunk of his forearm. He could retract the thing into a thin ring around his wrist, like a bracelet. The sleeves of his hoodie easily covered it. He snapped his fingers, and the most he could muster when the gauntlet was on was a small, pathetic spark. That's good enough, he remarked to himself. He still wasn't ready to venture outside of his lab house. He continued to program artificial intelligence for the box, trying to give it a voice. He wanted the box to be able to respond to him, to validate his conversations with himself. If it weren't for the calendar on his computer and access to the internet, the Sentinel wouldn't have any idea of how much time he spent alone. Without clear visibility of sunlight and an irregular sleep schedule, he could never tell what time it was. He could never tell when days became nights and days again, when weeks ended and months began, when a new year was born and another ended. It flew past him like nothing, and he was content. The box, however, with its newly imbued voice, was not. The box's first words, when it was turned on again and it floated off the lab counter, were, "Sentinel, you need to get out there. Do what you're meant to do." The Sentinel smiled for the first time in a couple of years. Hearing another voice was comforting, especially the voice of an old friend. He shook his head, however, and responded, "Is the war over?" "Affirmative." "Did I end it? Is it over in this time?" The Sentinel asked, knowing full well how the box drew its information. Its core could access any time period that ever happened or will happen, and its information bank did the same. The box could pull information from any time, and the Sentinel wanted to clarify that it was over now. But the box stayed silent. So the Sentinel rephrased, "Is the world safe? Do I have to keep being a Sentinel?" The box continued its silence. "Well, if you won't tell me if the world's safe, I'll just check myself." The Sentinel walked away from the counter. He prepared himself for leaving the house, cleaning himself and shaving his face. The Sentinel reached out for the box and flashed away. He appeared in the center of a city, the year 3046. He let the box pick an arbitrary time in the future, just to make sure everything was safe. This was his first time outside in 2 years. The sun blinded him for a second, even with his sunglasses, but when his vision adjusted, he smiled. People roamed the streets happily and safely. The city was bustling, even more so than it had been in his time. It seemed that the future couldn't get better. He was slightly disappointed, though. Not much was different than where and when he came from. He had hoped that the introduction of the Allied Guards to human history would advance human technology into the future. He moved on and walked into a nearby coffee house at the base of a skyscraper. He decided that he should take advantage of being outside for once. He approached the barista. She was a short young girl with trim purple hair that dropped to her chin. Her round face glowed with ambition. Her round glasses magnified her strange, grayish-blue eyes. She wore a pink hoodie with sleeves too long for her arms. She looked up from her tablet, taking off her glasses, and saw the Sentinel. "Hey, do you—" the Sentinel began. "Whoa!" The girl gasped with excitement. "Oh mon Dieu! L'anglais?" "Sorry, no hablo—" The Sentinel paused for a second, thinking about what she said. "French." "Aren't I in New York still? Why are you speaking French?" "Wow, I have been waiting to use my English for so long. Did your parents teach you too?" The girl jumped up and down excitedly. No, I don't know French, nor do I have parents," the Sentinel said, sounding annoyed. He just wanted to enjoy some coffee from the future, not partake in an unwanted conversation. He wasn't used to social situations, even before he became the Sentinel. "How do you not know French? Where are you from?" The girl looked intrigued. "Look, it's a long story. I'll just go." The box floated in front of the Sentinel and bumped into him, preventing him from leaving. "Wait, don't leave," she blurted out. She rested her elbows against the counter and rested her head on her hands. "Tell me more." "No, really, I shouldn't. I'll be holding up the—" The Sentinel turned around. There was no line. There was no excuse. He turned back around. "It's been a slow day. I'm bored." "Fine," he said sternly. "But you won't believe me." "What's that?" The girl pointed toward the box, floating calmly over the Sentinel's shoulder. The Sentinel paused, then sighed. "That's my time machine." The girl laughed. "You expect me to believe—" "Wait." She gasped and had a moment of realization. "Are you— No, are you?" "Am I what?" "You're the Sentinel, aren't you?" She quickly stood up as tall as she could manage, and excitement filled her eyes, and she smiled wide. "We're learning about you in class. You're that guy that blew up Ilio something way back when, aren't you?" "You got me." He didn't smile, nor was he happy that he was known at all. He turned around and started to leave. "Okay, I guess you already know my story then. Bye." He grabbed the box, shaking it to leave. He didn't teleport as quickly as he intended. The girl ran from behind the counter and up to the Sentinel. "You have to tell me more. You know that, right? You can't just show up as the only customer of the day and be the Sentinel and then not elaborate. Come on, sit down." The girl pulled him into a chair and she sat across from him. "So?" She smiled. "What brings you to Old York?" "Oh, it's old now? When did they decide that? Seems arbitrary." Around when the whole Canada Prime thing happened, I think. The whole world was Canada." She thought about it for a moment. "Ized less than a few hundred years ago. We ditched the name Earth." Hold on, what? In what idiotic world would any historical events lead to something as ridiculous as that?" The Sentinel questioned. "Is this a joke? Beats a planet named after dirt." The Sentinel stood up. "Why am I trusting you as a source?" You probably shouldn't. I'm failing history." The girl held out her hand. "I'm Vaxx, by the way." The Sentinel looked down at her hand. Without taking it, he said, "And I'm going home." "No, wait." Vaxx quickly followed behind him. "Take me with you. Please?" She looked up at him, waiting for any sort of response. "You're literally the only thing I enjoy about my history class, and you being here is the only interesting thing to happen to me this week. Year. I'm too dangerous," the Sentinel answered. "I don't want any more people to die at my expense." "Why are you such a downer? With that attitude, you'll never have any fun." Vaxx looked up at him. "I just want to see the past, and then you can send me back. Look, I can't just take you with me, not even if I wanted to. What's the worst that could happen?" "You could die." He pushed her hand off his shoulder and kept walking. "At your house? I hope not. That would be weird. What is it, booby-trapped?" "What's your problem? Why do you want to come with me so bad?" "Problem? You're my only customer today, and you're the Sentinel. You have a time machine. I hate my life. Of course I want to time travel, stupid. I'm not letting this opportunity pass me by." "Listen, kid." "Kid?" Vax scoffed. "You're one to talk. I'm 18. You look like you're 19, pretending to be 25. The Sentinel shook his head. He tried to respond with his age, but the answer wasn't so simple. Technically, he was over 60 years old, but none of Adam Jaminski's life felt like the Sentinel's. But if he admitted that he was really only about 6 years old, with memory of only a little over a year of that, it wouldn't sound right. "Not a kid," he answered. "Come on, it can't be that bad. Just take me one place and I'll go home, I promise." Vaxx looked up at the Sentinel with expectant eyes. I've had a shitty day. I need this, okay? The Sentinel hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He knew Vaxx wouldn't leave him alone. Fine. One trip. He reached out for his box, and he and Vaxx flashed away to the front of his lab. Vaxx stared at the landscape, at the distant city skyline, so different from her time. The sky was bluer, the grass greener. The Sentinel opened his door, and Vaxx rushed in. She led herself through a tour of the lab, mesmerized by tech lying about, paying no mind to the state of disrepair the house had become. She wandered over to a room. Wait, don't. The Sentinel knocked out of a trance-like float through his house to stop Vaxx as she entered Matrona's room. He hadn't been there in 2 years. It was always too much to manage. Is this? Vaxx looked around, realizing her mistake. Yes. Yes, it is. This was my daughter's room. I'm sure she was mentioned in your history class. Oh, Vaxx said under her breath. Get out. We're done. The Sentinel growled sternly. I'm sorry, I didn't know where I was going. I don't care. You shouldn't be here at all. You're leaving right now. I made up my mind when I saw you, but now you crossed a line. I thought I'd humor you, but it looks like I made a mistake. I said I'm sorry. I said I don't care. Now you can either let me take you back before I change my mind, or you can stand there and lose your chance to get back home. She gave one last look around the room, and she walked towards him, head held down. She asked under her breath, where did this all start? He heard what she said, and as he grabbed the box, he had one thought on his mind. Adam. Before he knew what was happening, he ended up at the beginning of a new year, his first year, 2015. Where are we? Vaxx looked around the streets of New York. I don't know why I haven't taken you home yet. We're leaving. The Sentinel grabbed Vaxx by the arm. He reached out for his box, but before he could, it spoke.
Sentinel, we shouldn't leave just yet.
Why shouldn't we?
Because it's your birthday.
No, it isn't. And even if it was, why would it matter?
You misunderstand. The date today is January 22nd, 2015.
2015? Vaxx said excitedly. No way! And why can't we leave? The Sentinel asked the box, annoyed, still holding on to Vaxx. You're being a pain, you know that? Why don't you just work the way I want you to?
Because you didn't come here by accident. Someone is here to see you. It's urgent.
The box moved from the Sentinel's vision, allowing him to see across the street. It was the hospital Adam Jaminski was found in. Light snow blurred the Sentinel's vision, but he could spot a person. After moving forward a bit, he was able to see that it was a man wearing a red leather jacket with a popped collar. He was fiddling with something hanging around his neck. He pushed his fingers through his long, unkempt brown hair, looking around, almost as if searching for someone. Is that? The Sentinel thought he recognized the man. He let go of Vaxx and approached him. Vaxx rubbed her arm, trying to remedy the soreness. She quickly followed the Sentinel, as did the box, floating above his shoulder. The Sentinel approached the man. Who are you? He demanded. How do you know me and why are you here? Whoa, chill out, the man said, laughing. Get it? He paused. Because it's snowing. Silence surrounded them. Nothing but a slight breeze could be heard. Come on, really? Nothing? I liked it, Vaxx said quietly. See, she gets it. The man chuckled, smirking. Who are you? The Sentinel demanded. I am the Paradox Master, and I know everything there is to know about everything. My job is to prevent and repair paradoxes. That's why I'm here. That's also why you're here. What do you mean? The Sentinel became worried. Vaxx stood behind him, shivering. We should get inside first. The Paradox Master straightened his jacket, revealing a purple crystal hanging in a cage of copper wire on a loose black string around his neck. He turned around. Oh, and also, he turned his head. You might want to hide that time machine. It could freak out some of the locals. Right. The Sentinel reached out for it, turned it off, and placed it in his hoodie. He walked inside the hospital and sat down in some waiting room chairs. Alright, so here's the issue. Unsurprisingly, people don't like you, Sentinel. You pose a threat to a lot of bad people. Also, not surprisingly, you aren't the only person in the universe to have time travel technology. This is the best way I can put it. Have you ever heard of that time travel cliche of killing some bad guy when he's a baby? So, these guys, the Sentinel realized, they want to get rid of you the easy way, by killing you as a baby. Who would hate me that much? The Sentinel questioned. Time-traveling shapeshifters known as the Gars. The Sentinel's face drained of color and his stomach dropped. The war's supposed to be over. Time travel, Sentinel. They're not from your present. The Paradox Master stood up from his chair. Well, we better get to work finding them before they, prevent you from ever having existed. That wouldn't be good, now would it? The Paradox Master looked around. He spotted 4 doctors, all talking amongst themselves and staring down the Sentinel, Vaxx, and himself. Hold on now, the Paradox Master said under his breath. He walked over to the doctors. The Sentinel and Vaxx followed close behind. Do you think we can trust this guy? Vaxx asked the Sentinel. We? I don't trust you. The Sentinel looked down on her. I'm still taking you home after all this. But yes, I can trust him. He's the guy that gave me the blueprints for my time machine. Excuse me, gentlemen. The Paradox Master cleared his throat. Juik soy ens dunon rults dunon? He asked in Garish. Quonon say, one of the doctors answered. The Paradox Master chuckled quietly. No reason. He turned and walked back to the Sentinel. We've got one. Hey, Paradox guy? Vaxx pointed. Turn around. The Paradox Master turned around, and the doctors were gone. He looked down to see their coats on the floor, and he turned his attention to the hallway. 4 rats were scurrying down it. We've got 4 of them. The Paradox Master ran down the hall. New York, he yelled as a nurse dropped her papers. The Sentinel and Vaxx ran after him, passing the nurse. The guards disguised as rats made a sharp turn and crawled into an air vent. The Paradox Master paused in front of it, and the Sentinel and Vaxx stood behind him, waiting. Well? The Sentinel asked impatiently. Go on, crawl through the vents. The Paradox Master paused. He sighed. Taking off his jacket, he hung it on the wall and kicked the vent down. The Paradox Master squatted down and began to crawl in, but before he went all the way through, he stopped. Follow me. This is exactly where I thought today was going. Vaxx went in front of the Sentinel, and got close behind the Paradox Master as he crawled in. The Sentinel knelt down and followed after them. I should be home right now. How's the view? Vaxx asked the Sentinel. Vaxx, this is an urgent issue. Stop messing around. Hold on, the Paradox Master interrupted. Shh. He leaned his head over a vent leading into a dark room. He could barely make out Adam Jaminski's crib. He could see the silhouettes of the disguised guards making their way down the hall. The lights flickered on. Vaxx hit her head on the ceiling of the vent, and the lights turned off with a thud. The Paradox Master looked back at her, fingers over his mouth and eyes wide. A nurse walked in and picked up baby Adam. She made her way out of the door and closed it. The guards shapeshifted back into their true forms. A guard reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, the Paradox Master fell through the vent, sticking the landing. Vaxx followed and landed not quite as gracefully. The Sentinel jumped down, landing on his knee. His fist hit the ground, and a spike of crystalline plasma shot up from the ground, illuminating the room. His powers startled him. The Sentinel stood up. Where do you think you're going? He jolted his arm outwards, and a metallic yellow circlet made its way to his wrist, tightening and extending into a gauntlet. He didn't want his powers to get too far out of control. But the entire gauntlet burst into plasmatic flames. Vaxx stared at it, wide-eyed. The Paradox Master raised his arms as roots of plasma crawled up and wrapped around the door handle, keeping it closed. They aren't going anywhere until we're finished with them. The Paradox Master extended a blade of crystal plasma from each of his wrists. The Sentinel was surprised to see that the Paradox Master could also control plasma. Vaxx backed herself up to the wall, awkwardly laughing. Guys, what do? I don't have cool powers, she whispered loudly. The Paradox Master turned back to her. Don't worry, we'll take care of this. He turned toward the guards, and all he saw was an empty space, and the door was blasted open. Shoot! He soon took off running. The other 2 took off behind him, and Vaxx asked, So you're sure we can trust him? Doesn't feel like he has a handle on this right now. The Sentinel didn't answer and took off ahead of her. Another doctor in the hall, who was holding a clipboard, quickly transformed into his true garish self, dropping the clipboard and turning his attention to the nurse in front of him. The child! The Gar yelled at her, widening his bright yellow eyes and lifting his thin, pitch-black eyebrows. Hand it over! He roared, showing off his serrated teeth. Jameson? The nurse stepped back in fear. The other guards were terrorizing the hospital, threatening civilians and blocking the exits. Oh, this is just asking for paradoxes. The Paradox Master assessed the situation. This is going to be a lot of work. Okay, Vaxx! He turned to her. Keep the nurse and that baby safe. Got it! Vaxx nodded and ran to the nurse. She took her hand and ran into the lobby with her. Come with me, she yelled as the nurse screamed in fear. And Sentinel, you're fighting with me. The Paradox Master's hands caught a flame as he ran toward the guards. The Sentinel charged into battle, growing increasingly annoyed with the situation. Vaxx led the nurse to a desk, and they slid underneath it and hid themselves. Vaxx leaned in and whispered, Hi, I'm Vaxx. I'm from the future. Nice to meet you. I'm here to protect the kid. Is it yours? Take it, the nurse yelled to her. No, not mine, actually. Just, trying to do a public service and protect a child here. What are those things? The nurse whimpered, pointing toward the Gars. Those are Gars, and they want to kill that baby. What? Yeah, Vaxx thought. Why am I protecting it? I can't do anything. She stood up and yelled across the room, Hey, Sentinel, how am I supposed to protect the baby? The Sentinel and the Paradox Master were locked in combat with 5 Gars, but as Vaxx called attention to herself, the Gars took notice. The Sentinel yelled back sarcastically, I don't know, maybe don't draw attention to yourself? The Gars charged towards Vaxx, the nurse, and baby Adam. Vaxx put her arms up. The Sentinel tossed the box at her. It turned on and wedged itself in the floor, creating the shield around them. The 4 Gars hit the shield with a thud. After they oriented themselves, they tried to break through the shield. The Paradox Master jumped into the air, spinning around. A plasma shard extended from his foot, and he kicked a guard down to the ground. He held it down and shot its wound with a beam of electrified plasma. The guard disintegrated on impact. The Sentinel was impressed, but he felt that he could do better. He snapped his fingers, and an explosion appeared between 2 Gars. One was launched into a wall and was barely affected. Another was sent flying through a window and impaled itself on a tree outside. People flooded out of the hospital through the window. The Sentinel and the Paradox Master took care of all but one of the Gars. The final Gar smiled, showing its sharp and serrated teeth. and it raised its dark black feathery thin eyebrows before it flashed away before the Sentinel and the Paradox Master could attack. Vaxx handed Adam to the nurse. The box lowered its shield, and the nurse ran from the hospital with the baby. Well, the Paradox Master put his jacket back on and straightened it. I've got some behind-the-scenes work to do. See ya. He started to walk away, but stopped. French, right? He asked Vaxx. She nodded. Au revoir. He smiled as he flicked his hand outward in a weird mix of a wave and salute. He walked out of the hospital. Au revoir. Vaxx waved excitedly back to the Paradox Master. He was nice. Vaxx walked up to the Sentinel. Wasn't he? Sure. All right, time to take you home. He turned to Vaxx. Vaxx laughed. I just saved you as a baby. I think I'm owed some more time travel. Are you failing math too? Because that equation does not add up. What do you want from me? I've been waiting for a chance to escape. You showing up to my coffee shop for no reason at all is a sign so flashy and blatant that I'd be an idiot to ignore it. The Sentinel lifted a finger, about to argue against her, but then thought about it. Standing in the ruined hospital, he heard sirens in the distance. Well, wherever we go, it's gotta be soon because the police are about to show up and we'll look really suspicious. I don't want to have to try to explain that I'm a time traveler to anyone from 2015. He held out his hand. Vaxx smiled and placed her hand on his. They flashed away, back to the lab.